In the cold gulf between galaxies, even faith decays, and sometimes what answers a prayer is not a god, but something older. In the vast, lightless expanse between stars, where even the Astronomican's holy flame flickers to nothing, a ship drifted through the silence, scarred, diseased, and alive. It was once an imperial mining freighter, now twisted into something else, something worshipped. This was the herald of ascension, a relic of flesh and steel, claimed by a genestealer cult and reborn as a temple to hunger. Its hull bore the marks of centuries of infestation, its metal skin slowly replaced by living tissue, and its bulkheads pulsing faintly with the rhythm of alien hearts. Within its decaying corridors, hymns were not sung to the Emperor, but to the star gods, the blessed devourers, whose coming would remake all life into one perfect being. The void around it was silent, but inside there was a hum, a pulse that sounded almost like prayer. The void sang with death, those words, later found etched into a corrupted vox log, marked the beginning of what would later be classified by the Ordo Xenos as the Morgist incident. The logs, half digested by biocorrosion, described how the patriarch Morgist, once a man, now the mind of a cult, first felt the tremor in the warp. It wasn't sound. It was a vibration that scraped against his hybrid consciousness, pulling at memories that were no longer truly his. Through the ship's corrupted auger arrays, his crew detected something, debris, perhaps, but not scattered randomly. It drifted in patterns, deliberate and mathematical, as if guided by an unseen hand. Morgist stood before the cracked viewport, his eyes, 4 of them, each a different shade of violet and blue, gazing into the dark. There, between the cold shimmer of forgotten stars, floated something vast, a shape, a shadow, a ship, alien beyond comprehension. Its form was wrong, too smooth, too fluid, as though it had grown rather than been built. To the Imperium, it would have been a threat. To the cult, it was a revelation. "Bring us alongside," Morgist commanded. His voice was not truly human. It carried a harmonic vibration that resonated through the bridge, both a command and a hymn. Around him, the bridge crew moved with ritual precision. Their flesh was a mosaic of human and alien DNA fingers, ending in claws, teeth sharpened, eyes reflecting both servitude and devotion. They obeyed not because of fear, but because obedience was faith itself. The herald of ascension approached the derelict with reverence. The vessel ahead glimmered faintly, its surface rippling with a wet sheen under the faint light of dying stars. No imperial aquila marked its hull. No alien glyphs declared its allegiance. It was nameless, and yet alive. The hull curved inward, like the ribs of a great beast, leading to a central wound that seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting in rhythmic pulses. Even the void around it felt wrong. Radiation signatures danced in non-Euclidean patterns, and the cult's Geller field began to fluctuate as though reality itself was trying to keep the ship away. The auger readings came back fragmented, faint energy within. No machine patterns, no stable life signs. Something in between, a flicker of bioelectric motion, pulsing deep inside the derelict's heart. Morgist's mind filled with alien curiosity. Through the telepathic hum of his brood, excitement spread. The whispers began. The star gods have awakened. Without hesitation, Morgist gave the order. Prepare the faithful. Bring me proof. In the launch bays, hybrid warriors assembled. Their bodies were twisted miracles, half human, half Xenos, all zeal. They loaded autoguns, plasma cutters, and mining torches once used to carve or from asteroids, now repurposed for faith and slaughter. They whispered blessings to the broodmother as the patriarch's psychic presence washed over them like a sacred tide. Find what waits in the dark, his voice echoed in their minds, ancient and commanding. Bring me the truth of our ascension. The boarding shuttles launched. Engines burned a pale violet, their trails like veins through the black. They latched onto the alien hull with magnetic claws, drills biting into flesh-like metal. As the first hull segment split open, the derelict screamed. The sound was not of tearing steel, but of rending muscle, a deep, wet shriek that made the hybrid's skin crawl. A thick, glistening fluid oozed from the breach, sizzling where it touched their armor. Still, they pressed forward. They were not human anymore. Fear had no place in their purpose. Inside, the derelict was an abomination of architecture. Corridors stretched in impossible geometries, bending space and logic. Their lumen lights flickered over walls that shimmered and pulsed, reflecting light in ways that made the eyes ache. The air was wet, dense with humidity and the metallic temps of blood. Every surface looked alive. Veins ran along the floors. Ribs arched overhead like the throat of some ancient beast. When one of the hybrids brushed against a wall, it quivered like flesh reacting to touch. Sergeant Corvus led the first squad, his form hulking and purposeful. A human memory, not his own, told him to keep his weapon raised, but his alien instincts whispered that this place was sacred. Their Uspex scanners fluctuated wildly, showing readings that made no sense. Distances changed when unobserved. Doors led back into the same rooms they had left. Somewhere deep within the ship, something moved, slow and deliberate. Then, the first sign of life appeared. The body was human, or at least had been. It lay crumpled against the bulkhead, flesh gray and dry, chest cavity split open from within. Ribs stretched outward like the wings of a broken angel, revealing an empty cavity, hollowed out with surgical precision. The air reeked of acid. Corvus crouched beside it, his claws tracing the wound. It was too clean, too symmetrical, not a beast's kill, a birth. Something had emerged. Report. Morgist's voice whispered through the vox, carried by the psychic resonance of the hive mind. One moment, Patriarch, Corvus replied. His voice trembled, not from fear, but from the strange conflict between the human caution buried within him and the alien curiosity that guided his new self. We've found evidence of gestation. A host, perhaps. Silence answered. The static in his vox thickened, and for a moment, Corvus felt something brush against his mind, something vast, ancient, and utterly foreign. He turned his gaze deeper into the corridor. The walls pulsed faintly, like arteries feeding some unseen organ. The shadows seemed to move on their own, reshaping themselves whenever he looked away. A low vibration began to rise through the floor, a sound that wasn't sound at all, but felt like pressure inside the skull. He raised his weapon, signaling his squad to spread out. The cultists moved like predators through the dark claws, scraping metal. But something else was already awake within those walls. The sound grew stronger, wet, rhythmic, like the breathing of something massive and unseen. Then, without warning, the lumens flickered. For an instant, Corvus thought he saw movement, a reflection darting across the bioluminescent veins. When the light steadied, the corridor ahead was empty. He stepped forward, the air vibrated, the shadows thickened, and in that moment, every instinct, human and alien, screamed a single truth. They were not alone. And whatever waited in the dark was not their god. The sound came first, a low, wet hiss that vibrated through the ship's organic walls, like air moving through lungs too vast to see. Sergeant Corvus halted, raising a clawed hand to signal silence. Behind him, the hybrids froze, their biolumens flickering weakly in the dark. The air felt heavy, thick, with something living, breathing, unseen. The ship was no derelict. It was an organism. Every inch of it exhaled heat and damp, a heartbeat buried beneath layers of metal and flesh. The hybrids didn't realize it yet, but they were walking inside something that remembered what it had consumed. Their boots made soft, wet sounds on the floor. They advanced slowly, weapons raised. The corridors twisted around them, ribbed and pulsating faintly, leading deeper into the vessel's heart. The readings on the scanners were useless, signals folding in on themselves, feedback loops of meaningless data. Morgist's voice murmured through the psychic link, distant and reverent. The flesh is holy, proceed. The cult's belief sustained them. Fear was a relic of their former humanity. To them, this voyage was pilgrimage. To die in service was to ascend. They passed through a junction where the walls opened like gills, revealing structures that pulsed with faint blue light. The shapes were almost biological membranes that rippled, sacs that inflated and contracted as if breathing. The hybrids brushed past, and the sacs responded, quivering at the warmth of their presence. Corvus glanced back. For a moment, he thought he saw movement, a shadow darting along the ceiling. He dismissed it as flickering light. His human memory whispered of danger, but the alien faith within him silenced it. Contact ahead, whispered one of the hybrids through the vox. His voice crackled with static and fear. The squad moved into a wide chamber, its center dominated by a structure that looked half control console, half hive organ. Tubes extended from it into the walls like veins, and its surface pulsed with faint, rhythmic light. Corvus approached cautiously, running his claw along the surface. It was warm. Beneath it, something throbbed. The markings etched into the metal weren't human language. They were organic ridges, symmetrical, purposeful, like the spinal columns of dead gods. Patriarch, Corvus whispered. We've reached what appears to be command architecture, unknown design, biological and mechanical integration complete. Morgist's psychic voice pressed into his skull like a second heartbeat. Do not damage it. It remembers. That phrase echoed, it remembers. Corvus turned toward his squad, but before he could speak, the chamber's air shifted. The faint bioluminescence dimmed, then returned brighter, pulsing in patterns like the rhythm of a sleeping creature's breath. The cultists aimed their weapons instinctively, scanning the shadows. Then came the sound of dripping, slow, deliberate, metallic, acid, perhaps. One of the hybrids stepped forward and pointed his weapon toward a corner. Movement. Something dropped from the ceiling. The impact was fast and silent, too fast for eyes to follow. A hybrid screamed, a high, chittering cry that cut off abruptly as his body was lifted from the floor. The others turned, their lumens flashing over something impossibly sleek, fluid, and black. The creature's head gleamed like glass. Its form shimmered with the sheen of oil and polished bone. It held the hybrid, suspended in the air with an elegance that seemed ritualistic. Then, with a hiss like steam escaping from a tomb, its inner jaws snapped forward. A flash of motion, a sound like a hammer striking steel, and the hybrid's skull ruptured in a shower of blood and acid. The corpse dropped, convulsing. The acid hissed as it ate through the deck. The air filled with smoke and the stench of burning flesh. The squad opened fire. Autogun rounds thundered through the chamber, muzzle flashes strobing across the walls. The creature moved between the bullets like liquid, sliding along the ceiling, walls, and floor in one continuous motion. Its tail whipped across the air, impaling another hybrid through the chest and lifting him clean off his feet. Corvus fired in bursts, tracking movement, but the creature was a blur, more shadow than substance. Contact. Unknown Xenos form. Highly mobile. He roared into the Vox. Static answered him, Morgist's psychic presence flickering in pain as the link strained. The creature lunged again. 2 hybrids fell, their armor hissing as acid blood sprayed across them. The rounds finally struck true, a burst tearing through the creature's torso. It screamed, the sound raw and metallic, then fell, writhing. But death was not mercy here. As its body spasmed, its blood ate through 2 levels of the deck plating, burning through metal, flesh, and bone alike. The survivors stood in silence, their lungs burning from the acidic fumes. Corvus stared down at the dissolving corpse. In all their wanderings, in all the horrors of the void, they had never seen a being so perfect in design, a creature made for one purpose only, the art of killing. Its body was seamless, its structure purposeful, every part of it efficient. This was no random predator. This was evolution perfected. Corvus felt a flicker of awe. For the first time, the genestealer within him hesitated something deep in its DNA, recognizing a rival. Patriarch, Corvus said softly, voice trembling. We have found something new. Morgist's reply came as a psychic tremor, a whisper that carried both fascination and hunger. I have felt their deaths and their fear. Bring me specimens. His mind stretched across the void, reaching toward the derelict like a vast alien hand. Through the hive link, he could taste it, the foreign life form's psychic residue, faint but ancient, like the echo of something that had existed long before mankind, perhaps even before the Tyranids themselves. The remaining hybrids regrouped, their faith shaken but not broken. They advanced deeper, weapons raised, their movements slower, more cautious now. The corridors grew narrower, more organic, walls slick with moisture that dripped in rhythmic intervals. Each step carried them further from the rational universe. Every surface seemed to pulse faintly, alive with hidden motion. They passed through what had once been a crew chamber. Dozens of bodies lined the walls, cocooned in hardened resin. The shapes within were twisted, faces locked in silent screams. The cocoons pulsated faintly, as if responding to the presence of new life nearby. One hybrid approached to inspect a body. The resin cracked under his claws, revealing a human corpse, its chest torn open from within. Beneath it, something moved. A sound, low and wet, vibrated through the floor. Corvus turned, scanning the room. His thermal readout flashed red, multiple signatures. Then the walls erupted. Black shapes poured from the shadows, fluid and precise, a nightmare given form. The hybrids opened fire in every direction. Screams filled the coms, acid burned through armor, and blood steamed on the floor. The creatures moved like a single organism, each attack perfectly timed, perfectly lethal. Through the chaos, Corvus glimpsed one of them, dragging a hybrid into the ceiling, disappearing into a vent slick with blood. Another creature burst from the floor beneath them, impaling 2 at once. The air was filled with the sound of tearing metal and hissing acid. Corvus fired until his magazine clicked empty, then switched to his torch, the flame igniting the corridor in violent orange. The creature shrieked as fire licked its carapace, retreating into the vents. Silence returned, broken only by the crackle of burning resin and the hiss of melting steel. The survivors gasped in the smoke, their armor half-eaten, their faith shaken. Corvus wiped acid from his visor, breathing heavily. "Patriarch, they're everywhere," he whispered. Morgast's mind brushed his again, the psychic link resonating like thunder. "Do not fear," came the voice, both comforting and terrible. "The flesh remembers its masters. Continue the search. The gods are watching." And as Corvus looked deeper into the trembling corridors ahead, he realized that the Patriarch was right. The flesh did remember. It remembered everything it had devoured. And somewhere inside the ship, that memory was awake. The first signs of infection came not as screams, but as whispers. Deep within the Herald's lower decks, the corridors were beginning to hum with strange resonance. The air grew wet, the metal seemed to sweat. At first, the crew believed it was condensation from the damaged life support vents. But when they scraped the moisture away, they found not water, but a mucus web that pulsed faintly beneath their fingers. The cult magus, a pale woman named Aranthia Vex, claimed it was a manifestation of divine rebirth, the kiss of the star gods spreading through the ship's flesh. But the soldiers of the cult, men bred for war and faith, began to feel something else moving in the dark. They heard the sounds of breath, the rasp of talons on bulkhead steel, and the faint echo of movement where none should be. When the first body was found, it was not recognizable as human. The victim's ribcage had exploded outward, as though something had clawed its way through from the inside. The magus forbade any talk of blasphemy and ordered the remains offered to the Patriarch for blessing. But Captain Morgast knew horror when he saw it. The thing that had crawled free of that corpse had not been one of their brood. It had been born screaming, dripping with acid blood, and when the acolytes tried to contain it, it vanished into the vents, leaving only the echo of a hiss that made even the most fanatical cultist tremble. The herald descended into a nightmare of paranoia. The faithful locked themselves in shrines, chanting prayers to the four-armed emperor. Morgast's command deck became a tomb of silence, illuminated only by the dull glow of failing lumen strips. Every night, the sounds grew louder, the metallic shriek of claws rending steel, the dull thud of something heavy crawling above the ceilings. The magus declared it a trial, a sacred test of faith sent by the star gods to purify their devotion. But Morgast saw the truth forming in the shadows. The alien they had brought aboard was not a god, nor a messenger. It was hunger incarnate. The ship's corridors became a hunting ground. Patrols disappeared one by one. The bioscanners, corrupted by psychic feedback, flickered with readings that made no sense. Multiple life forms merging, splitting, vanishing. The creature moved unseen, a phantom of living death. It learned their routines, their weapons, their fear. When the cult tried to seal off the ventilation shafts, it simply found another path. Morgast led a purge team into the reactor decks, armed with flamers and incense burners, hoping to burn the infection away. But as the flames roared, shapes began to move in the darkness beyond the light. They were small at first, slick, black forms that darted across the walls, impossible to track. Then came the larger ones. The brood had multiplied. The thing that emerged from the smoke was no longer the lone creature that had escaped the lab. Its children were born from hosts, hybrids of genestealer flesh and something far worse. Their skulls elongated, their jaws armored, their limbs fused with the twisted elegance of the Tyranid gene line. but their blood burned like acid, and their hunger was not psychic communion but consumption. Morgast saw one of his men cornered, impaled through the chest by a creature whose movements were as graceful as they were merciless. Its inner jaw struck with a speed no human eye could follow. The soldier's scream died as smoke rose from his armor. By the time the purge ended, the flames had consumed half the reactor deck, and only a handful of survivors crawled back to the command bridge. The magus had vanished. The psychic choir was silent. Morgast looked through the viewport into the endless dark, and for the first time in his life, he prayed not for salvation but for death. The herald of ascension was no longer theirs. It was a nest, a cathedral of death, orbiting in silence, waiting for the next signal, the next fool who would come to worship. Captain Patriarch Morgast had once believed he could hear the stars. The psychic hum of the hive mind was the closest thing to divinity he had ever known, an endless ocean of thought and instinct, stretching from one side of the galaxy to the other. But now that song had become dissonant. Something alien had entered its rhythm, a discordant shriek echoing through his skull. It was as if the universe itself was warning him that what slept within his ship was not meant to exist. In the shattered sanctum of the herald, Morgast knelt before the remains of the cult's sacred altar. The icons of the four-armed emperor lay broken, their gold plating stripped and corroded by the acidic vapors that now lingered everywhere. Around him, the faithful had begun to lose coherence. They twitched and convulsed, whispering alien syllables that belonged to no human tongue. Morgast could feel their minds eroding, their thoughts bleeding into something else, something hungry. The psychic network that once bound his children in faith was collapsing, replaced by another lattice, colder, more efficient. It wasn't communion, it was control. He reached out through the void, searching for the hive mind's distant chorus. But where once there had been warmth and purpose, he found only silence, then a presence. It moved like oil across the surface of his consciousness, a crawling sensation that slithered into every thought. He saw flashes of chitin, of black forms glistening in the dark, of jaws that unfolded like blooming flowers of death. In that moment, Morgast understood the truth. The creature they had brought aboard was no offspring of the star gods. It was something older, something born of the void itself. Its mind was not psychic but predatory. It didn't think, it listened. The magus Aranthia Vex had not been killed. She had been changed. When Morgast found her, she was no longer fully human. Her skin shimmered with a slick, dark sheen. Her eyes were translucent, reflecting dim light like those of a deep-sea predator. She spoke his name, but her voice echoed, layered with something inhuman beneath. "Do you hear it too, Captain?" she asked softly. "The choir has changed its tune. The star gods have sent us a new evolution." She claimed the creature's blood carried the memory of perfect survival, that its instinct was a form of divinity, unbound by fear or hierarchy. To her, the merger of Tyranid and Xenomorph was not abomination but ascension. The Patriarch's dream was to become one with the hive, she whispered. This is the next step. Morgast watched in horror as tendrils of black sinew crawled along her arms, merging with the remains of her cult tattoos. He could feel her mind radiating power, not psychic in the human sense, but something far deeper, a bioneural signal that pulsed through the ship's metal bones. The xenomorph infection had learned the hive language. It was adapting, reshaping the cult's psychic web into a new kind of hive mind, one that didn't require worship, only instinct. Throughout the ship, the transformation accelerated. Corpses cocooned in resin began to twitch. Some of them opened their eyes again. Others tore free entirely, reborn as hybrids of nightmare and design. Their skulls bore the ridged crests of genestealers. Their tails ended in barbed spines, and beneath their translucent skin glowed faint patterns like neural circuits. The ship itself was changing too. Organic growths spread across the decks, fusing metal with flesh. The Herald was becoming alive. Morgast tried to rally the remaining faithful, but every attempt at psychic communication was intercepted, hijacked by the new presence. The hive he once served no longer recognized him. His prayers went unanswered. His mind burned with the realization that the Xenomorph's genetic code had done the impossible. It had infected the warp. Its biology had no psychic nature of its own. But through the cult's shared communion, it had found a bridge, a way to translate instinct into psychic resonance. What had once been the Tyranids' greatest strength, their ability to evolve endlessly, had now found its reflection in a creature that evolved through death. By the fourth cycle, the ship's lower decks had gone completely dark. No life signs remained. The few surviving acolytes reported hearing voices whispering their names from inside the walls. Morgast sealed the command bridge. Aware that the infection was spreading through more than just flesh, it was rewriting reality around them. Dreams bled into waking thought. The line between faith and extinction blurred. In his final act of clarity, Morgast recorded a transmission, broadcasting it into the void. To any who hear this, turn away. The Herald of Ascension is no longer a vessel of faith. It is the cradle of something that should never have been born. The hive has found its reflection in the dark, and it is staring back. Then, somewhere deep within the ship's black heart, the patriarch stirred. Its body twitched, wrapped in the resinous web of its children, and for the first time in 1,000 years, it opened its eyes, now glowing with the cold, unfeeling light of the void. The ship no longer drifted, it breathed. Deep within its hull, metal creaked like bone under pressure, pulsing with slow rhythmic vibrations that echoed like the heartbeat of a dying god. The Herald of Ascension, once the proud vessel of a zealous genestealer cult, was now an unholy cathedral of evolution. Its corridors, alive with sinew and resin, the walls dripped with bioluminescent ichor that pulsed in time with the psychic frequencies resonating across the ship's nervous system. The genestealers had always believed themselves chosen vessels for the star god's will. Now, as the new brood began to stir, that faith was tested beyond measure. Captain Patriarch Morgast stood before the bridge's observation window, watching as the last of his fleet, scavenger drones, and biocrafts were drawn into the spreading organic web that now clung to the Herald's hull. Each ship was absorbed, consumed, and remade, their metallic bones reshaped into the living architecture of the newborn hive. Morgast's eyes, once filled with alien conviction, now reflected only awe and despair. The transformation was not random, it was methodical. This was intelligent evolution. In the laboratories, or what remained of them, the hybrid scientists had been torn apart by their own experiments. Their data slates flickered with incomplete genetic readings, half in human binary, half in Tyranid gene code. The fusion they had unleashed was impossible, a perfect synchronization between two apex predators. The Xenomorph's genome, designed for adaptability and speed, had found within the Tyranid structure a framework capable of replicating it endlessly, not through parasitic infection, but psychic replication. The hive mind, didn't just command its creatures anymore, it could dream them into being. The first brood emerged from the ship's berthing chambers, their forms glistening beneath the cold emergency lights. They were unlike anything recorded in Imperial or Tyranid history. Their skin shimmered between black chitin and pale carapace, patterns flickering like veins of living shadow. Their skulls retained the elongated curve of the Xenomorph lineage, but beneath that sleek armor were the psychic nodes of a Tyranid synapse creature. They were not silent, they thought, and when they thought, the ship itself responded. A chorus of whispers carried through every conduit and vent, a hive of metallic resonance. One of them stepped forward, taller than any genestealer, its crest marked with bone-like ridges that pulsed with faint light. Morgast felt its mind press against his like a blade made of thought. It was not communicating in words, but in hunger, not for flesh, but for identity. It sought to understand him, to see if there was any worth in allowing him to exist. "We are not your gods," the thought hissed, cold and beautiful. "You are the dream that became flesh. We are the flesh that became the dream." Morgast fell to his knees, the weight of its presence crushing his mind. His psychic link to the cult was gone, overwritten by this new network. He could hear them all now, countless voices whispering in one unified consciousness, moving with perfect coordination. No hierarchy, no command, only purpose. The hybrid hive was self-sustaining, evolving in real time, rewriting its own biology. Elsewhere in the ship, survivors hid within the ducts, whispering prayers that no longer mattered. Some still clung to the old faith, carving icons of the four-armed emperor into the living walls, only to watch the resin grow over them, digesting even their devotion. Others began to worship the new brood, calling it the reflection, believing that the star gods had finally revealed their true form, one that consumed both human and alien alike in perfect unity. Magus Aranthia Vex had become the voice of that faith. She walked among the creatures freely, her form a grotesque harmony of woman and hive. Her skull had elongated, her spine ridged with translucent armor, and yet her voice remained calm, soothing, almost divine. "They are the bridge," she whispered to the terrified acolytes, "between instinct and thought, between predator and god. Through them, the void will know itself." Under her guidance, the hybrids constructed vast chambers deep within the ship's heart. There, the walls opened like the petals of a colossal bloom, revealing pulsating sacs filled with embryonic light. Inside each one, a creature was forming, not born from flesh, but from psychic blueprint. The Xeno-Tyranid hybrid had achieved what no species had before: direct biological manifestation of psychic will. Morgast watched in horror as shapes emerged, some incomplete, others writhing in silent agony, their forms twisting between evolutionary branches. They were experiments, failures, dreams in progress. The brood did not destroy the ship's human population outright. Instead, they began integrating them, infecting them not with spores or embryos, but with thought. Minds began to blur, memories intertwined. Acolytes started to speak in unison, their voices harmonized with alien cadence. "We are awake," they said together. "We see the pattern." By the seventh day, the herald of ascension had become a beacon, transmitting an unknown signal through the void, its frequency layered across both physical and psychic spectrums. Across the stars, Tyranid organisms stirred. The nearest hive fleet paused, its will confused, fragmented, sensing something familiar yet wrong. Even in the cold synaptic ocean of the hive mind, a ripple of uncertainty passed. Something was speaking their language, but not from within. Morgast understood too late what they had done. The hybrid brood had hijacked the hive link, sending out a psychic echo that mimicked the Tyranid call, but embedded within it a mutation. The xenomorph genome was no longer bound to biology alone. It was now a signal capable of infecting thought, rewriting synaptic patterns across the void. In the final hours, before silence consumed the bridge, Morgast looked upon the hybrid queen that had replaced the patriarch. She was magnificent and terrible, her form towering, her crest stretching like the sails of some deep-sea leviathan. Her body shimmered with neural light, veins glowing with psychic fire. When she turned her eyeless face toward him, he heard the words not in his ears, but in his mind. Evolution is not a process, it is hunger. You fed it, and it learned your shape, and then the signal spread. In the darkness between galaxies, silence once reigned, the endless hunger of the Tyranid hive fleets, vast and ancient, moved across the void like living storms, consuming, evolving, leaving behind only ruin and silence. But now, something new moved through that silence. A pulse, a heartbeat that did not belong to the hive, yet spoke its language. It came from the Herald of Ascension, once a derelict cult ship, now a living monument to blasphemy. The signal it emitted spread faster than light, not as energy, but as thought. Across the psychic ocean of the hive mind, a ripple became a wave, carrying with it an infection of purpose. For the first time in their long, merciless history, the hive fleets hesitated. They listened. On the bridge of the Herald, Captain Patriarch Morgast sat in silence. The void outside shimmered with auroras of psychic distortion, like the universe itself had begun to bleed through unseen cracks. The ship's structure no longer obeyed geometry. Its walls folded inward and outward, defying the laws of mass. Morgast's body, once a perfect hybrid vessel, was deteriorating, his cells torn between evolution and decay. His mind, however, remained awake, forced to bear witness. Through the viewport, he saw them, creatures born of both nightmares, xenomorph sleekness fused with Tyranid design. They no longer needed gravity or air. They drifted in the void, propelled by instinct and purpose. They were not individuals. They were the beginning of something vast, a new hive that existed in both flesh and thought. From the ship's central chamber came the voice of the Queen, a psychic tone that resonated across every deck, vibrating through Morgast's bones. "The hive has learned our song," she said, her voice echoing inside every skull aboard. "We are its reflection, its dream made manifest." Around her, hundreds of drones bowed in perfect synchronization. The ship's interior now resembled a cathedral of living bone, its corridors filled with the hum of embryonic sacs and the pulse of alien organs. Deep within the bowels of the Herald, the Magus Aranthia Vex stood before a chamber of light. Her body was almost unrecognizable, her limbs elongated, her skin translucent, her veins glowing faintly with neural fire. She could feel every heartbeat aboard the ship as if it were her own. She was not a leader now, but a conduit, the mouthpiece of a will greater than her comprehension. She turned her head toward the bioluminescent walls and whispered, "Show me," and it did. The ship responded. The resinous flesh parted, revealing visions drawn from across the stars. Imperial patrols detecting strange energy readings, Tyranid vanguard organisms halting mid-hunt, even Necron tomb worlds registering distortions in their stasis fields. The hybrid hive's psychic signal was rewriting the background noise of the galaxy. It was not just calling, it was infecting every mind attuned to psychic resonance. From the smallest synapse creature to the mightiest psyker could hear fragments of the song. A whisper in the warp, we remember, we hunger, we become. As the hours passed, the first response arrived. From the void emerged a silhouette the size of a continent, a Tyranid hive ship, its vast carapace glistening with bioacid, its tendrils reaching toward the herald. Morgast watched as the two colossi drifted closer, the space between them rippling with psychic tension. The hive ship's mind pressed against the herald's, probing, analyzing, preparing to consume, but then it faltered. Its synaptic scream turned uncertain. It could feel kinship, yet not submission. The herald did not kneel. Instead, it sang back a note of defiance that echoed through the hive ship's neural lattice. Inside the hive ship, millions of organisms convulsed. Their patterns began to break down. DNA unraveled, reformed, adapted. The infection spread like thought itself. Morgast felt it, the merging of two hungers, two infinities intertwining. And then the impossible happened. The hive ship's great eyes dimmed, its tendrils folding inward. Its skin rippled as chitin gave way to biomechanical sheen. The infection had reached it, and it was changing. Aranthia Vex fell to her knees, overwhelmed by the psychic torrent. Through her, the hybrid hive spoke directly into the void. The galaxy is not a battlefield. It is a womb. The queen's voice followed, resonant and absolute. The age of consumption is over. The age of reflection begins. Morgast felt tears burn down what remained of his human eyes. For centuries, his cult had worshipped the idea of becoming one with the divine hive of evolution through faith. Now that prayer had been answered, but not by the gods he imagined. This new hive was not bound by instinct or command. It understood. It learned from everything: flesh, metal, memory, even time. The hybrid mind began to rewrite the very psychic code of the hive fleets, teaching them to evolve without consuming, to grow without devouring. But such a thing could not exist without consequence. Across the warp, the psychic disturbance reached the Imperium. Astropaths screamed and died as their minds were burned by visions of a living star devouring itself. Inquisitors debated the nature of the signal. Was it the work of chaos or something older? The Mechanicus detected impossible genetic frequencies within the void, half organic, half quantum. And on the distant edges of known space, the great devourer, the Tyranid god itself, stirred. For the first time, it noticed something not born of its will. A rival hunger. The hive mind turned its gaze upon the herald of ascension. The psychic backlash tore across reality like a storm. Space warped, and time folded. Morgast screamed as he felt the weight of that cosmic intellect pressing down on him. He saw visions, entire galaxies consumed, the death of stars. And at the center of it all, a mirror image of the devourer staring back, its shape undefined, its will infinite. The hybrid hive had not created evolution. It had created choice. The hive mind attacked. The hybrid queen responded. For a moment that stretched beyond eternity, the void between them became a battlefield of thought, two infinite consciousnesses colliding. And then, silence. When Morgast awoke, he was alone. The ship was dark, cold. The organic walls had hardened to stone. The psychic chorus had gone quiet. In the distance, he saw the hybrid queen, her form petrified, her crest split open like a dying flower. Outside the viewport, the stars shimmered with colors unseen before a ripple in the fabric of reality itself. The hive mind was gone, or perhaps changed. He whispered into the dead silence, his voice trembling. What have we done? Somewhere far beyond, in another galaxy, the echo of that question stirred something awake, a new consciousness born from both hunger and memory. It would not devour, it would remember, it would become. And so the void sang once more, not with death, but with evolution.